Tonight, we're going to explore something that will deeply challenge how you see the flow of time itself. Time paradoxes. 7 specific situations where the mathematics of physics creates scenarios so conceptually difficult that reality itself seems to behave in unexpected ways. These aren't just thought experiments or science fiction concepts. They're genuine consequences that emerge from our best understanding of how the universe actually works. And by the end of this journey, you're going to understand why some of the brightest minds in physics have spent decades trying to resolve contradictions that make the very notion of cause and effect feel less intuitive than we assume. Before we dive in, if you find these explorations of the deeper mysteries of physics meaningful, a quiet like or subscribe helps this channel continue. It's a small gesture for you, but it makes these long-form investigations possible. Now, let's begin our descent into the temporal puzzles that make reality feel less solid than our everyday experience suggests. Consider what you think you understand about time. Events happen in sequence. Causes precede effects. The past is fixed. The future is open. And the present is this thin boundary between what was and what might be. These seem like fundamental truths about existence itself. Yet when we follow the mathematics of general relativity to their logical conclusions, when we trace out the paths that matter and energy can take through the curved geometry of space-time, we discover something unexpected. Time doesn't always behave the way our intuition insists it should. The first paradox emerges from a simple question. What if you could travel backward in time, not through some fantastical machine or mystical portal, but through the actual geometry of space-time itself? Einstein's equations permit what physicists call closed timelike curves, regions where the curvature of space and time creates loops that connect a point in space-time to its own past. These aren't violations of relativity, they're solutions to it. Picture space-time as a fabric that can be bent and twisted by mass and energy. In most regions, this fabric curves gently, creating the gravitational fields we experience around planets and stars. But under extreme conditions, near rotating black holes or in the presence of exotic matter configurations, the curvature can become so severe that time-like paths, the routes that material objects follow through space-time, can loop back on themselves. An observer following such a path would move forward through time from their own perspective, aging normally, experiencing a normal sequence of moments. Yet they would arrive at an event in their own past. The mathematical possibility is clear. The logical consequences are profound. This brings us to what's known as the grandfather paradox, though it applies to any attempt to change past events. Imagine you discover that your grandfather, long before you were born, made a decision that led to lasting hardship for your family line. Perhaps he made an investment that affected generations, or chose a path that brought serious consequences to many descendants. You decide to travel back in time to prevent this decision. You arrive in the past, locate your grandfather as a young man, and successfully stop him from making the fateful choice. The logic seems straightforward until you trace through the consequences. If you prevent the decision that led to your family's hardship, then the motivation for your time travel disappears. The version of you that grew up experiencing those consequences, the version that felt compelled to travel back and intervene, would never have existed. But if that version of you never existed, then no one traveled back to prevent the decision. So the decision happens as originally intended, creating the motivation for the time travel, which prevents the decision, which removes the motivation, and so on in an endless loop of contradiction. The paradox reveals something deeper than a logical puzzle. It suggests that the universe might be internally inconsistent if backward time travel is possible. Each potential change to the past creates a branching structure of contradictions that extends infinitely into logical space. Reality becomes not a single coherent narrative, but a theoretical superposition of incompatible histories, each equally valid and equally difficult to reconcile. Some physicists have proposed the Novikov self-consistency principle as a resolution. This principle suggests that the laws of physics themselves prevent paradox-creating events from occurring. In this framework, if you travel back in time intending to kill your grandfather, some circumstance will inevitably prevent you from succeeding. The gun will jam. You'll change your mind at the crucial moment. A stranger will intervene. The universe naturally enforces consistency, ensuring that any actions you take in the past were already part of the timeline that led to your existence. But this resolution comes with its own unsettling implications. It suggests that free will might be more constrained than it appears when time travel is involved. Your choices become limited by the necessity of maintaining temporal consistency. You believe you're making decisions, but the outcomes are already shaped to avoid paradox. The feeling of agency becomes deeply questionable within the mathematics of space-time. The second type of paradox emerges from a different direction entirely. Instead of creating contradictions through changing the past, it creates conceptual difficulties through circular causation. This is known as a bootstrap paradox, named after the impossible notion of pulling oneself up by one's own bootstraps. In these scenarios, objects, information, or even people become trapped in closed causal loops where they have no discernible origin. Consider a scenario involving information. You're a composer in the year 2024, struggling to write a symphony. One day, you discover the mathematical possibility of sending messages backward in time. You decide to send a query to your future self, asking for help with the composition. Your future self, now a successful composer, receives the message and sends back the complete musical score of a beautiful symphony. You receive this score from the future, perform it, and gain recognition as a talented composer. Years later, when you receive the original message from your past self, you send back the same score that brought you success. The symphony exists. It's been performed, recorded, and admired, but where did it come from? Your future self created it, but only because your past self received it from the future. Your past self could send the query because your future self had already sent the response. The information exists in a closed loop with no point of origin. It's a complete composition that was never actually composed by anyone. This informational bootstrap paradox challenges our understanding of creativity, innovation, and the nature of knowledge itself. If information can exist in temporal loops, then the universe might contain knowledge that was never discovered, art that was never created, and solutions that were never derived. The bootstrap paradox suggests that causation itself might be less straightforward than we assume. Physical objects can become trapped in these loops as well. Imagine you own a pocket watch, a family heirloom passed down through generations. One day, you discover its history. Your great-grandmother received it as a gift from a mysterious stranger in 1920. Decades later, you travel back in time to 1920, and realizing the historical significance of the moment, you give your great-grandmother the same pocket watch. She treasures it, passes it down through the family, and eventually it reaches you. You take it back to 1920, give it to her, and the cycle continues. The watch exists. You can hold it, wind it, watch its hands move. But it was never manufactured. No craftsman shaped its case or assembled its mechanism. It exists in a closed temporal loop, aging through each cycle, only to be reset when you carry it back to its beginning. The watch becomes effectively timeless, having existed for countless loops through the same decades, yet somehow maintaining its structure despite the apparent tension with thermodynamics. These bootstrap paradoxes reveal a fundamental tension between our understanding of causation and the mathematical structure of space-time. They suggest that under certain conditions, effect can precede cause, that information can exist without source, and that objects can persist without origin. The universe becomes not just stranger than we suppose, but stranger than we can suppose. The third category of temporal paradox involves the relationship between knowledge and inevitability. These predestination paradoxes emerge when attempts to change the future instead cause the very events one is trying to prevent. They suggest that time might be more rigid than we imagine, that the future might be as fixed as the past, and that our sense of choice might be constrained by the necessity of maintaining temporal consistency. Consider a scenario where you receive information from the future. Perhaps through some technological breakthrough, you intercept a message intended for someone else, a message that describes a specific outcome occurring next Tuesday at 3:47 p.m. while climbing the stairs in your office building. The message is specific, detailed, and apparently from a reliable source. Determined to avoid this outcome, you decide to work from home next Tuesday. You avoid stairs, avoid stress, avoid anything that might contribute to the situation described. Tuesday arrives. You're safely at home, feeling proud of having outmaneuvered destiny. Then, at 3:47 p.m., news breaks that the office building you would have been in has collapsed due to a structural failure. The shock of realizing how narrowly you avoided the situation leads to the very outcome the message described, occurring at exactly 3:47 p.m., just as predicted. The paradox lies not in the accuracy of the prediction, but in its causal role. Your knowledge of the future created the very circumstances that fulfilled it. Without the message, events would have unfolded differently. With the message, your actions ensured its fulfillment. The information from the future became a self-fulfilling prophecy, creating a causal loop where the prediction causes its own accuracy. These predestination paradoxes suggest that the universe might be deterministic in ways we don't fully appreciate. They imply that the future might be as fixed as the past, that our choices might be constrained by the necessity of maintaining consistency across time. Knowledge of the future becomes not a tool for changing it, but a mechanism that ensures its inevitability. As you consider these paradoxes, notice how they challenge not just our understanding of time, but our sense of agency and meaning. Each one suggests that reality might be less flexible, less controllable, and less comprehensible than we assume. They reveal the universe as a place where logic can fold back on itself, where cause and effect become circular, and where the very notion of a coherent timeline becomes conceptually fragile. The mathematics that predict these paradoxes aren't speculative. They emerge directly from our best-tested theories of space, time, and gravitation. Einstein's general relativity, confirmed by countless experiments and observations, permits closed timelike curves under certain conditions. Quantum mechanics allows for retrocausality and non-local correlations that challenge our intuitive notions of temporal sequence. The paradoxes aren't failures of physics, but consequences of it. Yet we continue to experience time as linear, causation as straightforward, and choice as meaningful. This disconnect between the mathematical structure of reality and our lived experience creates a fundamental uncertainty about the nature of existence itself. We inhabit a universe that might permit logical contradictions, yet we must navigate it as though consistency and meaning persist. This disconnect suggests something profound about the relationship between mathematical truth and experienced reality. Perhaps the universe operates on principles that transcend our capacity for intuitive understanding. Perhaps logic itself, as we conceive it, is merely a local phenomenon, useful for navigating our immediate environment, but inadequate for comprehending the deeper structures of existence. The fourth paradox emerges from the intersection of time travel and mechanical determinism. Known as Polchinski's paradox, it strips away questions of consciousness, free will, and human agency to focus on pure physics. No grandfathers, no moral dilemmas. Just a billiard ball, a wormhole, and the unforgiving mathematics of trajectory and collision. The scenario is elegantly simple. A billiard ball rolls through empty space toward the mouth of a wormhole. The wormhole connects 2 points in space-time, such that anything entering one end emerges from the other end 30 minutes in the past. The ball's trajectory is precisely calculated. If it continues along its current path, it will enter the wormhole, emerge 30 minutes earlier, and collide with its own past self at exactly the right angle and moment to alter its trajectory, preventing it from ever entering the wormhole. The mathematics are straightforward. The physics are well established. The logical contradiction is difficult to reconcile. If the ball enters the wormhole, it prevents itself from entering. If it doesn't enter, then there's no future ball to provide the collision that prevents entry. The system oscillates between two mutually exclusive states, each one logically requiring the other, while simultaneously making it impossible. Reality becomes conceptually unstable at the level of basic mechanics. What makes Polchinski's paradox particularly unsettling is its mechanical purity. There are no decisions to be made, no intentions to be thwarted, no consciousness to be confused, just matter following the laws of physics through curved space-time. Yet those same laws generate a scenario where consistency becomes extremely difficult to maintain. The universe, it seems, can construct logical contradictions from its own fundamental principles. Physicists have found potential solutions trajectories where the future ball either nudges the past ball into the wormhole rather than away from it, or strikes it at an angle that alters but doesn't prevent its entry. These solutions maintain consistency by fine-tuning the collision parameters, but they come with their own challenging implications. The universe must somehow coordinate events across time to ensure that every collision, every trajectory, every minute detail of the interaction produces outcomes that avoid paradox. This suggests that the physics of time travel might require what amounts to extraordinary coordination. Every particle, every force, every quantum fluctuation must somehow be constrained by the necessity of maintaining temporal consistency. The universe becomes not a place where things happen according to local laws alone, but a vast system where global consistency plays a central role. You might wonder whether such extreme fine-tuning is realistic, but consider that we already live in a universe that exhibits extraordinary fine-tuning in its fundamental constants. The strength of gravity, the mass of electrons, the rate of cosmic expansion. All of these parameters fall within incredibly narrow ranges that permit the existence of stars, planets, and complex structures. Perhaps temporal consistency is simply another constraint that the universe must satisfy, another boundary condition that shapes what kinds of events are possible. The fifth paradox takes us deeper into the realm of information and identity. It begins with a simple question about the nature of knowledge itself. Where do ideas come from? How is new information created? The bootstrap paradox suggests that under certain conditions, information might exist without ever being discovered, created, or derived. Consider the case of a mathematical proof. You're working on a complex problem that has puzzled mathematicians for centuries. After months of struggle, you make a breakthrough and construct an elegant proof. You publish your result and gain recognition for solving an important problem. Years later, you discover time travel and decide to help your younger self. You travel back to the period when you were struggling with the problem and anonymously send yourself the complete proof. Your younger self receives the proof, studies it, understands it, and publishes it as your own work. You gain the same recognition, follow the same career path, and eventually discover time travel. When you reach the appropriate moment, you travel back and send the proof to your younger self, just as you remember receiving it. The proof exists. It's been verified, published, and used to advance mathematical knowledge. But who created it? Your future self sent it to your past self, but your future self only knew it because your past self received it and lived the life that led to that knowledge. Though information exists in a closed loop with no point of creation, it's knowledge without discovery, truth without derivation. This informational paradox challenges our understanding of intellectual achievement and the nature of creativity itself. If information can exist in temporal loops, then the universe might contain an infinite library of knowledge that was never actually discovered by conscious minds. Theorems that were never proven, symphonies that were never composed, technologies that were never invented, all of it existing in the mathematical structure of space-time, waiting to be accessed through these unusual causal structures. The implications extend beyond individual pieces of information to entire intellectual traditions, scientific theories, philosophical insights, artistic movements. All of these could potentially exist as bootstrap phenomena, cultural achievements that bootstrap themselves into existence through temporal loops. The history of human knowledge becomes not a story of discovery and progress, but a complex web of circular causation where future insights create the past conditions that enable their own development. But perhaps most unsettling is what this suggests about the nature of consciousness and identity. If the knowledge that defines you as a person can exist without origin, then what does that say about the self that possesses that knowledge? Are you the creator of your ideas, or merely a participant in a process where information circulates through time? The bootstrap paradox makes personal identity feel less firmly anchored in traditional notions of authorship and achievement. The sixth paradox emerges from the quantum mechanical nature of reality itself. At the smallest scales, the universe operates according to principles that seem to challenge our classical understanding of causation and temporal sequence. Events at the quantum level can be correlated in ways that suggest information traveling backward in time, effects that precede their causes, and measurements that retroactively determine the properties of particles. Consider the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. A photon is split into two entangled particles. One particle travels a short path to a detector. The other travels a much longer path, passing through apparatus that can either preserve or erase information about which path it took. The crucial point is that the decision about whether to preserve or erase this information is made after the first photon has already been detected. Classical intuition suggests that the detection of the first photon should be independent of what happens to its entangled partner. Later, the measurement has already occurred. The particle has already interacted with the detector. The result should be fixed in the past, immune to future manipulations of the experimental setup. But quantum mechanics predicts something different. The future decision about whether to erase or preserve path information retroactively determines what kind of pattern the first photon creates at its detector. If the information is preserved, the photon behaves as though it took a definite path. If the information is erased, the photon behaves as though it took both paths simultaneously, creating an interference pattern that would normally require prior coherence. The experimental results confirm the quantum mechanical prediction. The future measurement appears to influence the earlier detection. Effect seems to precede cause. Information appears to flow backward through time. The universe operates according to principles that make temporal paradox a natural feature of quantum behavior rather than a rare exception. This quantum retrocausality suggests that time itself might be more flexible than our everyday experience indicates. At the deepest level, the universe might not respect the sharp distinction between past and future that shapes our conscious experience. Events might influence their own preconditions. Measurements might retroactively determine the properties they're supposed to be detecting. Causation might flow in both directions through time. As you contemplate these quantum temporal paradoxes, notice how they challenge not just our understanding of time, but our entire framework for making sense of existence. They suggest that the universe operates according to principles that extend beyond classical logic as we experience it. They reveal reality as stranger than fiction, more paradoxical than philosophy, and more mysterious than our deepest intuitions can easily accommodate. The seventh and perhaps most conceptually challenging paradox involves the nature of observation itself. In quantum mechanics, the act of measurement plays a fundamental role in determining the properties of particles. Before measurement, particles exist in superposition states, combinations of all possible outcomes. The measurement process somehow selects one outcome from this range of possibilities, collapsing the superposition into a definite state. But what happens when this measurement process involves time travel? Consider a scenario where quantum information is sent backward in time. A particle in the future is measured, and the result of that measurement is transmitted to the past, where it influences the preparation of the quantum state that will eventually be measured. The measurement in the future determines the state in the past, which determines what measurement result is possible in the future. This creates a closed causal loop at the quantum level, but one that's fundamentally different from the classical paradoxes we've explored. In classical physics, contradictions arise because definite events either happen or don't happen, but in quantum mechanics, events can exist in superposition, neither definitely happening nor definitely not happening until measurement forces a collapse into definiteness. The quantum measurement paradox suggests that these superposition states might extend across time as well as space. A particle might exist in a temporal superposition, neither definitely measured nor definitely unmeasured, until some process forces a collapse across the entire timeline. The universe becomes not a sequence of definite events, but a vast quantum superposition of all possible histories, with measurement processes appearing to select which history becomes real. This raises profound questions about the nature of reality and observation. If the act of measurement can retroactively influence the past, then consciousness and observation take on broader significance. The universe becomes not an objective reality, independent of observers, but a theoretically collaborative process between conscious minds and quantum processes. Past, present, and future become entangled in ways that make individual identity and temporal sequence feel like useful approximations rather than fundamental truths. The mathematical formalism of quantum mechanics provides tools for calculating the probabilities of different outcomes in these temporal measurement scenarios, but the formalism doesn't resolve the deeper conceptual mysteries. It doesn't explain how measurement collapse works, why consciousness appears to play a special role, or what determines which history becomes real when multiple possibilities exist in superposition. The 7 paradoxes reveal time not as the simple, linear progression we experience in daily life, but as a complex, multidimensional structure where causation can flow in circles, information can exist without origin, and the future can theoretically influence the past. They suggest that our intuitive understanding of temporal sequence might be a useful approximation that breaks down under extreme conditions, much like our everyday notions of space and motion break down near the speed of light or in strong gravitational fields. Yet we continue to live as though time flows simply from past to future, as though causes precede effects, and as though our choices matter in determining what happens next. This disconnect between the mathematical structure of reality and our lived experience creates a fundamental tension in how we understand existence itself. We inhabit a universe that might permit conceptual contradictions, while experiencing it as though consistency and meaning persist. The paradoxes don't resolve themselves through clever reasoning or mathematical tricks. They persist as genuine mysteries that challenge our deepest assumptions about the nature of reality. They suggest that the universe might be stranger, more flexible, and more mysterious than our minds are equipped to fully comprehend. Time becomes not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean where currents can flow backward, where effects can precede causes, and where the very notion of sequence becomes difficult to define clearly. Perhaps what makes these paradoxes truly unsettling isn't their complexity, but their simplicity. They don't require exotic physics or speculative theories. They emerge directly from the mathematical foundations of our most successful descriptions of reality: general relativity and quantum mechanics, the twin pillars of modern physics. Each independently generates scenarios where time becomes less intuitive, where causation becomes ambiguous, where the very notion of a coherent timeline faces deep challenges. You might expect that combining these theories would resolve the paradoxes, that quantum mechanics might smooth out the sharp edges of relativistic time travel, or that general relativity might provide a framework for understanding quantum retrocausality. Instead, the marriage of these theories creates new forms of temporal complexity that are even more profound than either theory generates alone. Consider what happens when quantum mechanics meets the possibility of closed timelike curves. In quantum field theory, the vacuum isn't empty space, but a seething foam of virtual particles constantly popping into existence and annihilating each other. These quantum fluctuations normally average out to zero over time, maintaining the stability of empty space. But near a closed timelike curve, where paths can loop back to their own past, these fluctuations can accumulate coherently, building up energy densities that grow without limit. The mathematics predict that any attempt to create a closed timelike curve would trigger a runaway process where quantum vacuum fluctuations become amplified by their own causal loops. Virtual particles would become real particles, space itself would become highly unstable, and the entire region would collapse into what physicists call a quantum singularity. The universe appears to have built-in mechanisms that prevent the formation of time travel paradoxes by disrupting any space-time geometry that would permit them. This quantum censorship hypothesis suggests that nature strongly resists temporal paradox. Energy conservation, causality, even the stability of space itself becomes secondary to maintaining temporal consistency. The universe emerges as a vast computational system that effectively enforces logical requirements to determine what kinds of space-time geometries are permissible. But this resolution comes with its own deeply challenging implications. If the universe must constantly monitor itself for potential paradoxes and intervene to prevent them, then what we experience as natural law might be better understood as globally constrained behavior. Every quantum fluctuation, every gravitational wave, every particle interaction becomes constrained not just by local physics, but by global requirements for temporal consistency. The distinction between what is physically possible and what is logically necessary becomes blurred. Events happen not only because they follow from prior causes, but because they're required to maintain consistency across all of time. The universe becomes less like a mechanical system evolving according to deterministic laws, and more like a vast logical structure that must continuously avoid contradiction. As you consider these implications, notice how they challenge not just our understanding of time, but our entire conception of natural law itself. Physical principles that we thought were fundamental, like energy conservation and causal ordering, might be emergent properties of deeper consistency requirements. The laws of physics might be less like rules that govern behavior and more like constraints that reality must satisfy to remain logically coherent. This perspective transforms how we think about the relationship between mathematics and physical reality. We're accustomed to thinking that mathematics describes the universe, that equations capture patterns in how things behave. But temporal paradoxes suggest that the relationship might be reversed. Perhaps the universe conforms to mathematical requirements, reshaping itself continuously to satisfy logical constraints that transcend physical causation. The multiverse interpretation offers another approach to resolving temporal paradoxes, though it comes with costs that make reality feel even less stable. In this framework, every potential paradox creates a branch point where the universe splits into multiple parallel timelines. When you travel back in time to prevent your grandfather's fateful decision, you don't change your original timeline. Instead, you create a new branch of reality where the decision is prevented while your original timeline continues unchanged. This resolves the logical contradiction by allowing both outcomes to be true simultaneously. In one timeline, your grandfather makes the decision that leads to suffering. In another timeline, your intervention prevents the decision. Both timelines exist in parallel, each one internally consistent, neither one affecting the other. The paradox disappears because there's no single timeline that must accommodate contradictory events. But the multiverse solution transforms the nature of choice and consequence in ways that might be even more conceptually disturbing than paradox itself. If every decision creates parallel timelines where all possible outcomes occur, then the significance of individual choices becomes difficult to define. You might prevent suffering in one timeline, but that suffering continues in countless others. Every action you take is simultaneously taken and not taken across the infinite branches of the multiverse. Personal identity becomes fragmented across multiple versions of yourself, each one equally real, each one living out different possibilities. The person who successfully prevents their grandfather's decision and the person who fails both exist as separate but equally valid versions of you. Your sense of being a single, continuous self becomes a limitation of perspective rather than an absolute truth. The multiverse interpretation makes temporal paradoxes logically consistent, but at the cost of making individual existence feel highly contingent. Every possible version of events occurs somewhere in the vast branching structure of parallel realities. Every choice is made, every outcome realized, every potential tragedy, both prevented and fulfilled across the infinite multiplication of worlds. Perhaps more troubling is what this suggests about the nature of evidence and experience. The timeline you inhabit, the sequence of events you remember, the consequences you observe, all of these become contingent products of which branch of the multiverse you happen to occupy. Your entire experienced reality becomes one selection from an immense catalog of equally valid possibilities. The anthropic principle takes on new meaning in this context. You observe a timeline where temporal paradoxes seem to be avoided not because the universe prevents them, but because you happen to inhabit a branch of the multiverse where they don't occur. Other versions of you in other timelines might be experiencing unresolved contradictions. You're simply not aware of them because consciousness, like everything else, follows a single branch. These interpretations reveal time paradoxes as more than curious puzzles or interesting thought experiments. They expose fundamental tensions in our understanding of existence itself, whether resolved through cosmic conspiracy, quantum censorship, or infinite multiplication of realities. Each solution challenges basic assumptions about the nature of choice, identity, and meaning that underlie human experience. The mathematical precision with which these paradoxes can be formulated contrasts sharply with the conceptual chaos they create. We can write down the equations that govern closed timelike curves, calculate the probabilities of various outcomes in bootstrap scenarios, and model the quantum field theory of vacuum fluctuations near temporal loops. The mathematics is clear, consistent, and well-defined. But when we try to interpret what these mathematical structures mean for the nature of reality, we encounter contradictions that resist resolution. Each potential solution creates new problems that might be worse than the original paradox. Logic and physics seem to be pulling in different directions, creating a tension that makes the foundations of existence feel less stable. You might wonder whether these paradoxes represent genuine features of reality or merely limitations in our current understanding. Perhaps future theories will resolve the contradictions by revealing deeper principles that make temporal consistency and causal ordering naturally emergent properties of a more fundamental level of description. Perhaps consciousness and observation play roles in determining the structure of time that we don't yet comprehend, but it's also possible that these paradoxes reflect genuine features of reality that transcend logical resolution. The universe might be stranger than we can think, operating according to principles that challenge the very notion of rational comprehension. Time might be more flexible, causation more circular, and existence more paradoxical than our minds are equipped to understand. The experience of contemplating these paradoxes reveals something about the relationship between human consciousness and cosmic reality. We evolved to navigate a world of medium-sized objects moving at moderate speeds over familiar distances. Our intuitions about time, causation, and identity were shaped by survival requirements that had nothing to do with understanding the deep structure of space-time or the foundations of logic itself. When we push beyond the boundaries of everyday experience and follow the mathematics of our best theories to their logical conclusions, we encounter phenomena that challenge the basic categories through which we organize experience. Past and future lose their sharp distinction. Cause and effect become circular. Individual identity fragments across multiple timelines or becomes constrained by cosmic consistency requirements. These paradoxes don't resolve themselves through clever reasoning or mathematical manipulation. They persist as genuine mysteries that challenge our deepest assumptions about the nature of existence. They suggest that reality might be fundamentally more strange, more paradoxical, and more resistant to logical comprehension than we typically assume. As you sit with these ideas, Notice how they affect your sense of the solidity and reliability of existence itself. The timeline you inhabit, the choices you make, the identity you maintain, all of these might be more contingent and more fragile than everyday experience suggests. You exist in a universe where logic can fold back on itself, where cause and effect become entangled in ways that make linear narrative difficult to sustain, and where the very notion of a single, coherent reality becomes questionable. Yet somehow, despite these deep paradoxes at the foundations of physics, daily life continues with its familiar patterns of sequence and causation. Coffee cups fall and break. Conversations unfold in orderly progression. Memory links past to present in ways that feel continuous and meaningful. The paradoxes remain hidden beneath the surface of ordinary experience, like logical fault lines that could shift at any moment, but somehow never do. This disconnect between the mathematical structure of reality and lived experience creates a fundamental uncertainty about what we can trust and what we can know. Are the temporal paradoxes genuine features of reality that remain hidden only because we lack the technology to create closed timelike curves? Or are they artifacts of incomplete theories that will be resolved when we achieve a deeper understanding of the relationship between time, consciousness, and physical law? The question remains open, perhaps necessarily so. The universe continues to unfold according to principles that might permit logical impossibility, while presenting us with an experience of temporal flow that feels stable and meaningful. We inhabit a reality where paradox and consistency coexist in ways that challenge the very foundations of rational thought. Time becomes not a simple dimension through which events unfold, but a complex structure where past, present, and future interweave in patterns that resist comprehension. The 7 paradoxes we've explored reveal just the beginning of this complexity, hints of depths that extend far beyond what human intuition can accommodate. They show us a universe where the familiar categories of thought break down, where logic reaches its limits, and where existence itself becomes a mystery that deepens rather than resolves with increased understanding. The mathematics continue to evolve, offering new perspectives on these ancient puzzles while generating fresh paradoxes that challenge our evolving understanding. Each advance in theoretical physics seems to reveal new ways that time can become unstable, new scenarios where causation breaks down, new possibilities for existence to contradict itself at the most fundamental level. Perhaps this is what it means to inhabit a universe that is stranger than we can suppose, rather than merely stranger than we do suppose. The temporal paradoxes don't represent failures of physics or limitations of logic. They represent glimpses into a reality that operates according to principles that transcend our capacity for rational comprehension. In the quiet moments between thoughts, when the familiar rhythms of sequential experience momentarily pause, you might sense the deeper strangeness that these paradoxes reveal. The flow of time that seems so natural and inevitable becomes questionable. The distinction between past and future becomes blurred. The notion that you are a single, continuous self, moving forward through a coherent timeline, becomes just one possibility among many in a universe where identity and causation are more flexible than everyday experience suggests. The 7 paradoxes continue to evolve in the spaces between heartbeats, in the gaps between moments, in the quantum foam that underlies the apparent solidity of existence. They remind us that we live not in a universe of simple answers and clear categories, but in a reality where questions deepen infinitely and where mystery accumulates rather than resolves with increased knowledge. Time flows around these paradoxes like water around stones, finding paths that maintain the appearance of consistency while concealing depths that challenge the very notion of logical coherence. We continue forward, moment by moment, through a temporal landscape that might be far stranger and more unstable than the smooth progression of experience suggests. Perhaps the most unnerving aspect of these temporal paradoxes isn't their theoretical nature, but how close they might be to experimental reality. As our understanding of quantum mechanics deepens and our technology advances, we're discovering that the boundary between thought experiment and physical possibility grows thinner than we once imagined. Consider the quantum eraser experiments being conducted in laboratories today. Photons are being split, their quantum states manipulated, and their histories apparently altered by measurements that occur after their detection. The mathematics are precise, the experimental results are repeatable, and they suggest that information can flow backward through time in ways that challenge our fundamental assumptions about temporal sequence. These aren't exotic scenarios requiring black holes or cosmic strings. They're happening on laboratory benches, in universities, using equipment that fits in ordinary rooms. The universe reveals itself as operating according to principles that permit forms of retrocausality that make the past contingent on future measurements. You might wonder what this means for the nature of memory and historical fact. If quantum measurements can retroactively determine properties of particles, what does this suggest about the stability of events that have already occurred? Are your memories of past experiences as fixed as they seem, or might they be subject to revision by quantum processes that haven't yet completed their evolution? The delayed choice quantum eraser experiments suggest that the distinction between past and future might be more flexible at the quantum level than our everyday experience indicates. A photon that was detected hours ago can apparently be retroactively influenced by decisions made about its entangled partner in the present moment. The detection that already occurred becomes contingent on measurements that haven't yet been performed. This quantum retrocausality creates a new category of temporal paradox that doesn't require time machines or closed timelike curves. It emerges directly from the mathematical structure of quantum mechanics and the experimental verification of entanglement across space and time. The universe operates according to principles that allow effect to precede cause under precisely defined conditions. The implications extend beyond individual particles to the nature of information and knowledge itself. If quantum states can be retroactively determined by future measurements, then information about the past might be more fluid than we assume. The history that we think we know might be subject to revision by quantum processes that unfold across extended periods of time. Scientists working on quantum computing and quantum communication are beginning to explore practical applications of these temporal quantum effects. Quantum cryptography systems that use retrocausality to detect eavesdropping. Quantum computers that might perform calculations by sending results backward through time to influence their initial conditions. Technologies that blur the boundary between past and future in ways that could transform how we process and store information. But these applications come with their own conceptual challenges. How do you design a system that depends on effects preceding their causes? How do you troubleshoot a computer that might be influenced by its own future outputs? How do you maintain causally consistent operation when the fundamental physics permits logical contradictions? The engineering challenges of building technologies that exploit temporal paradoxes reveal deeper questions about the nature of design and intention. If a quantum computer can influence its own past states, then the distinction between input and output becomes blurred. The machine becomes not just a processor of information, but a participant in the causal loops that generate the information it processes. These practical considerations bring temporal paradoxes out of the realm of abstract philosophy and into the world of concrete engineering problems. The questions are no longer purely theoretical. They're becoming design specifications for technologies that might exist within decades rather than centuries. As you contemplate these near-term possibilities, notice how they change the character of the paradoxes we've explored. They're no longer distant thought experiments, but potential features of a world that your children or grandchildren might inhabit. Time travel might not require exotic matter or cosmic engineering. It might emerge from the careful manipulation of quantum states in devices small enough to fit on a desktop. The transition from theoretical physics to practical technology often reveals aspects of natural phenomena that pure theory misses. When paradoxes become engineering challenges, new forms of resolution emerge that combine mathematical elegance with physical pragmatism. The universe might permit conceptual contradictions in theory while constraining them in practice through mechanisms we don't yet understand. Quantum decoherence provides one such mechanism. In the pristine conditions of theoretical physics, quantum states can maintain coherent superpositions indefinitely. But in the real world, quantum systems interact with their environment in ways that cause superpositions to collapse into definite states. This decoherence process might naturally resolve temporal paradoxes by preventing the formation of stable causal loops. The timescales for quantum decoherence are typically extremely short. Quantum superpositions involving macroscopic objects collapse in fractions of a second due to their unavoidable interactions with thermal radiation, vibrations, and electromagnetic fields. This suggests that temporal paradoxes involving large objects might be naturally prevented by the same environmental effects that make quantum computers so challenging to build. But decoherence doesn't eliminate temporal paradoxes entirely. It transforms them from sharp logical contradictions into probabilistic phenomena that unfold over finite timescales. A causal loop might exist for microseconds or nanoseconds before environmental interactions cause it to collapse into a definite sequence of events. The paradox becomes not a permanent logical contradiction, but a transient instability in the causal structure of space-time. This probabilistic approach to temporal paradoxes suggests that the universe might tolerate brief periods of local causal ambiguity while maintaining long-term coherence through statistical mechanisms. Individual events might appear to violate causality, but the overall flow of time remains stable due to the averaging effects of quantum decoherence and thermal noise. The relationship between temperature and temporal stability becomes crucial in this framework. At absolute zero, where quantum decoherence is minimized, temporal paradoxes might persist indefinitely. But at finite temperatures, thermal fluctuations provide a natural mechanism for resolving causal loops before they can establish stable contradictions. This suggests that the universe's tendency toward increasing entropy, encoded in the second law of thermodynamics, might serve as a temporal consistency enforcement mechanism. Heat and disorder naturally break down the precise conditions required for stable causal loops, ensuring that time flows in a statistically preferred direction, even when individual quantum events permit temporary reversals. The cosmic microwave background radiation, the thermal afterglow of the Big Bang, provides a universal heat bath that permeates all of space. This radiation interacts with quantum systems throughout the universe, providing a constant source of decoherence that might prevent the formation of large-scale temporal paradoxes. The universe's own thermal history becomes a safeguard against persistent, logical inconsistency. You might find it remarkable that the same thermal processes that cool your coffee and age your body also serve to maintain the logical consistency of space-time. The arrow of time that we experience in everyday life might be intimately connected to the quantum mechanical processes that resolve temporal paradoxes before they can destabilize the causal structure of reality. This connection between thermodynamics and temporal paradoxes reveals deep relationships between seemingly unrelated aspects of physics. The tendency of systems to evolve toward thermal equilibrium becomes not just a statistical property of large collections of particles, but a fundamental mechanism that maintains the coherent structure of existence itself. The heat death of the universe, that distant future when all energy has been dispersed and all temperature differences have been eliminated, takes on new significance in this context. In a universe at perfect thermal equilibrium, quantum decoherence would cease. The thermal fluctuations that currently resolve temporal paradoxes would disappear. The mechanisms that maintain causal consistency would fail, perhaps in that far future when the universe has expanded and cooled beyond the possibility of sustained complexity. Temporal paradoxes will finally achieve stable existence. Causal loops will persist indefinitely in the perfect quantum isolation of absolute cold. Information will bootstrap itself into existence without origin. Past and future will become effectively indistinguishable in a universe where entropy has reached its maximum and time itself has lost operational meaning. But that future remains trillions of years away. For now, we exist in a universe warm enough to prevent stable temporal paradoxes, while cold enough to permit the complex structures that give rise to consciousness and observation. We inhabit a thermal sweet spot where time flows consistently enough to support coherent experience while remaining quantum mechanically active enough to generate the paradoxical possibilities we've explored. The fine-tuning required for this balance adds another layer of mystery to the relationship between physics and existence. The universe must be neither too hot nor too cold, neither too quantum coherent nor too classical, neither too logically rigid nor too paradoxically flexible. The parameters that permit conscious observers like ourselves might be intimately connected to the parameters that resolve temporal paradoxes. As you sit in the quiet darkness, perhaps aware of the thermal radiation from your own body mixing with the ancient photons from the cosmic microwave background, you're participating in the same processes that maintain the stability of time itself. Every breath you take, every thought you think, contributes to the vast network of quantum decoherence that prevents the universe from collapsing into unresolvable contradiction. The warmth you feel is not just the byproduct of biological processes, but a manifestation of the same principles that keep causality flowing in a consistent direction. Your existence as a conscious observer is possible only because the universe maintains the delicate thermal conditions that resolve temporal paradoxes while permitting the complex information processing that gives rise to awareness. This perspective transforms how we think about our place in the cosmic order. We're not just accidental byproducts of stellar evolution and planetary formation. We're participants in the fundamental processes that maintain the structural coherence of space-time itself. Our very existence depends on and contributes to the mechanisms that prevent reality from becoming globally unstable. The temperature of your body, roughly 310 Kelvin, represents a compromise between the energy required for complex chemistry and the thermal noise that disrupts quantum coherence. This temperature is warm enough to drive the molecular processes that sustain life while cool enough to permit the precise quantum mechanical interactions that might be necessary for consciousness itself. At this temperature, quantum decoherence occurs on timescales that match the duration of neural processing. Individual quantum events in your brain might persist just long enough to influence synaptic transmission before environmental interactions cause their superpositions to collapse. You exist at the boundary between quantum possibility and classical definiteness in a thermal regime that permits awareness while preventing persistent paradox. The relationship between consciousness and temporal paradoxes remains one of the deepest mysteries in physics. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that conscious observation plays a fundamental role in collapsing quantum superpositions and determining the outcome of measurements. If this is true, then consciousness might also play a role in resolving temporal paradoxes by forcing causal loops to collapse into definite sequences. But this possibility comes with its own conceptually challenging implications. If consciousness determines the resolution of temporal paradoxes, then the nature of time itself becomes contingent on the existence and properties of conscious observers. The universe's logical consistency depends not on impersonal physical laws, but on the subjective experiences of aware beings. This observer-dependent resolution of temporal paradoxes would make consciousness a foundational influence rather than a local phenomenon. Every conscious observation would contribute to maintaining the causal structure of space-time. Every mind would participate in the ongoing creation of consistent temporal order. The universe would become not just stranger than we suppose, but stranger than we could suppose without our own participation in its strangeness. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics takes on new dimensions when viewed through the lens of temporal paradoxes. If consciousness can retroactively influence the properties of quantum systems, then the distinction between subjective experience and objective reality becomes even more blurred than standard interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest. Your memories of past events might not be recordings of fixed historical facts, but active participants in the ongoing process of determining what actually happened. The act of remembering might be a form of quantum measurement that contributes to the description of the events being remembered. Personal history becomes not a sequence of definite occurrences, but a dynamic process of continuous construction through the interplay of memory and quantum mechanics. This possibility transforms the nature of identity and continuity over time. The self that you experience as persisting from moment to moment might be better understood as a quantum superposition of possible histories that collapses into definite form through the ongoing process of consciousness and memory. You exist not as a fixed entity moving through time, but as a dynamic pattern of quantum measurements that continuously refines its own past. The implications extend beyond individual identity to the nature of shared reality itself. If multiple conscious observers can influence the resolution of quantum measurements, then the world we inhabit becomes a collaborative construction rather than an objective given. The temporal paradoxes we've explored might be resolved not by impersonal physical mechanisms, but by the collective activity of conscious observation. This participatory universe interpretation suggests that reality is more fragile and more dependent on observation than conventional physics assumes. The stable flow of time that we take for granted might require the constant, unconscious contribution of countless minds interacting with quantum processes. But perhaps the most profound implication of this perspective is what it suggests about the cosmic significance of consciousness itself. If aware beings play a fundamental role in maintaining the logical coherence of space-time, then the emergence of consciousness in the universe becomes not an accidental byproduct of complex chemistry, but a deeply consequential feature of reality's self-maintenance. The universe might require conscious observers not just to know itself, but to maintain its own temporal consistency. Life and awareness become not optional additions to an otherwise complete physical reality, but essential components of a cosmos that cannot exist in stable form without them. In this framework, the rare conditions that permit the emergence of conscious life take on cosmic importance. The precise values of fundamental constants, the specific properties of matter and energy, the particular history of cosmic evolution that led to planets and chemistry, and eventually to minds capable of observation. All of these become not merely necessary for life, but necessary for the long-term coherence of existence itself. The anthropic principle, usually invoked to explain why the universe appears fine-tuned for the emergence of conscious observers, transforms into something deeper and more essential. We don't just observe a universe that happens to be compatible with our existence. We participate in maintaining a universe that may depend on observation to avoid logical contradiction. This participatory resolution of temporal paradoxes suggests that the question of whether we're alone in the universe carries implications that extend far beyond biology and chemistry. If consciousness plays a fundamental role in maintaining temporal consistency, then the distribution of aware beings throughout the cosmos could influence the stability of space-time itself. A universe with only one conscious species might be more vulnerable to temporal paradoxes than a universe with many different forms of awareness, distributed across multiple star systems. The collective activity of diverse conscious beings might provide more robust protection against causal loops than any single species could maintain alone. This raises questions about our responsibilities as conscious observers in a universe that might depend on observation for its stability. If our awareness and memory play a role in maintaining temporal consistency, then the quality and clarity of perception become matters of broader significance. Thoughtfulness and careful observation become not just personal virtues, but contributions to the coherence of reality itself. The development of artificial intelligence and machine consciousness takes on new significance in this context. If we create artificial systems capable of observation and memory formation, we might be adding new participants to the processes that maintain temporal consistency. The emergence of AI becomes not just a technological achievement, but a potential extension of cosmic participation. But we must be careful about how we interpret these possibilities. The relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics remains deeply debated in physics. Many interpretations of quantum theory require no special role for conscious observation. Quantum decoherence can occur through purely physical processes without any involvement of awareness. The resolution of temporal paradoxes through quantum decoherence and thermal noise might be entirely independent of consciousness. The universe might maintain its logical consistency through impersonal physical mechanisms that operate regardless of whether any conscious observers exist to witness them. This more conservative interpretation preserves the objective structure of space-time while acknowledging the deep mysteries that temporal paradoxes reveal about time and causation. The paradoxes remain genuine challenges to understanding without requiring consciousness to function as a cosmic force. In this framework, the significance of conscious observers lies not in maintaining reality, but in discovering and contemplating the deep principles that govern existence. We become not participants in cosmic maintenance, but witnesses to cosmic mystery. Our value lies not in what we do for the universe, but in what the universe has done in creating beings capable of understanding their own cosmic context. Both interpretations, the participatory and the observational, leave us with a profound sense of connection to the fundamental structures of reality. Whether we help maintain the coherence of space-time or simply observe its self-organizing processes, we exist as part of a cosmic order that is far stranger and more mysterious than everyday experience suggests. The temporal paradoxes we've explored reveal time not as a simple container for events, but as a complex structure that connects consciousness, causation, and the deepest principles of physical law. They show us a universe where logic and physics interweave in ways that challenge rational comprehension while maintaining enough stability to permit beings capable of contemplating their own existence. As you continue through this moment, aware of the strange loops of causation that might be operating beneath the surface of experience, you participate in whatever processes maintain the flow of time from past to future, whether through conscious observation or simple thermal interaction with your environment. Your existence contributes to the vast network of physical processes that keep reality coherent enough to support coherent experience. The paradoxes persist in the quantum foam that underlies all macroscopic phenomena, creating brief instabilities in the causal structure of space-time that resolve themselves before they can propagate into the classical world of everyday experience. Time flows around these quantum contradictions like a river flowing around stones, maintaining its overall direction while accommodating local turbulence that challenges the simple notion of linear progression. You exist in the calm surface current of this temporal flow, aware of the underlying complexity without being overwhelmed by it. The paradoxes operate at scales of time and space that remain hidden from direct experience, while shaping the conditions that make experience possible. They reveal a universe that is stranger than you can suppose, while remaining stable enough to support the supposing itself. The mathematics continue to evolve, offering new perspectives on the relationship between time, consciousness, and physical law. Each advance in understanding reveals new depths to the mystery, rather than resolving it into simplicity. The temporal paradoxes become not problems to be solved, but features of reality to be contemplated. In the quiet spaces between thoughts, when the familiar rhythms of sequential experience momentarily pause, the deeper strangeness becomes almost palpable. Time reveals itself as more flexible, more mysterious, and more intimately connected to the fundamental structure of reality than the smooth progression of moments suggests. You continue forward through a temporal landscape where every moment contains hidden layers of possibility and paradox. The emergence of these paradoxes from the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics reveals something profound about the relationship between mind and reality. When we observe quantum systems, we don't merely receive information about their properties. We participate in processes that might extend backward through time, influencing how those properties are described. Consider what happens when you make a quantum measurement. The standard interpretation tells us that measurement collapses a superposition of possibilities into a single definite outcome. But delayed choice experiments suggest something more conceptually challenging. The measurement you perform now might retroactively influence which possibility becomes part of the established history. This quantum retrocausality creates a new form of temporal paradox, where observation and measurement become intertwined with the causal structure of space-time itself. Your act of observation doesn't just reveal reality, it participates in shaping the reality it reveals. The implications are ripple outward from individual measurements to the nature of memory and historical fact. If quantum measurements can retroactively influence the properties of particles, then the events you remember from your past might be more context-dependent than you assume. The coffee cup that fell and shattered yesterday, the conversation you had last week, the decision you made last year. All of these might be understood as becoming increasingly well-defined through continued interaction and observation rather than being fixed once and for all. This doesn't mean your memories are false or that the past didn't happen. Rather, it suggests that the past might be continuously stabilized through ongoing processes of observation and interaction. Each moment of awareness contributes to the formation of a coherent narrative that we experience as history. The universe becomes not a fixed sequence of events that consciousness passively observes, but a dynamic collaboration between quantum processes and aware observers. Past, present, and future interweave in patterns where effects may appear to precede causes, where observation can influence historical description, and where the very act of remembering might shape what is remembered. You might wonder how this quantum view of time relates to the bootstrap paradoxes we explored earlier. Information trapped in causal loops might persist not through classical mechanical processes, but through quantum coherence maintained across multiple measurements. A piece of knowledge could exist in superposition across multiple timelines until conscious observation collapses it into a single, internally consistent loop. The symphony that was never composed might exist as a quantum superposition of all possible musical compositions until the act of receiving it from the future forces a collapse into one specific arrangement of notes. The mathematical proof that was never derived might persist in quantum indeterminacy until the moment of transmission backwards through time crystallizes it into definite logical form. These quantum bootstrap paradoxes suggest that creativity and discovery might operate through mechanisms more subtle than conscious intention and logical derivation. The universe might contain vast libraries of potential knowledge existing in quantum superposition, waiting to be collapsed into definite form through the right combinations of observation and temporal circumstance. But this quantum resolution of bootstrap paradoxes comes with its own conceptually unsettling implications. If information can exist in superposition across time, then the boundary between discovery and creation becomes blurred. Scientists might not be deriving new knowledge so much as selecting specific outcomes from quantum superpositions of all possible theories. Artists might not be creating new works so much as collapsing aesthetic possibilities into definite form through the process of conscious observation. The role of intuition and inspiration in human creativity takes on new significance in this context. The sudden insight that seems to come from nowhere, the unexpected solution that appears fully formed in consciousness, the artistic vision that feels discovered rather than invented. All of these might represent moments when quantum superpositions of possibility collapse into definite form through the mysterious intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics. As you contemplate these possibilities, notice how they transform your understanding of knowledge and achievement. The thoughts you're having right now, the connections you're making between ideas, the insights that seem to emerge spontaneously from the interplay of concepts. All of these might represent quantum measurements that are contributing to which possibilities become real in your personal timeline. The process of understanding itself becomes a form of temporal paradox. Each moment of comprehension might reach backward through your history of learning, refining which educational experiences led to your current state of knowledge. The books you read, the teachers you encountered, the conversations that shaped your thinking, all of these might exist in quantum superposition until the moment of understanding collapses them into a coherent narrative of intellectual development. This quantum view of learning and memory suggests that education is not simply the accumulation of information over time, but a complex process of retroactive construction where understanding in the present organizes what was learned in the past. Knowledge becomes not a possession acquired through study, but a dynamic pattern of quantum measurements that continuously reshapes its own history. The implications extend beyond individual consciousness to the nature of culture and collective knowledge. If human understanding operates through quantum processes that can influence interpretive history, then the development of science, philosophy, and art becomes a form of temporal bootstrapping, where future insights create the historical conditions that enable their own emergence. The scientific method itself might be a procedure for managing quantum superpositions of theoretical possibility. Experiments don't just test hypotheses that already exist in definite form. They collapse quantum superpositions of all possible theories into specific outcomes that then clarify which theoretical frameworks remain viable. The history of science becomes not a linear progression from ignorance to knowledge, but a complex web of quantum measurements where later discoveries stabilize the significance of earlier insights. Einstein's theories don't just describe relationships that were always true. They might retroactively define the space-time geometry that makes relativity valid. This perspective transforms how we think about the relationship between theory and experiment. Laboratory measurements don't just confirm or refute existing theories. They participate in a quantum process that might extend backward through time to influence how the very theoretical frameworks they're designed to test are understood. The universe collaborates with conscious observers in the construction of scientific knowledge through mechanisms that transcend classical notions of causation and temporal sequence. You exist within this vast quantum collaboration, your consciousness entangled with measurement processes that extend across space and time in ways that make individual identity feel both more significant and more mysterious than everyday experience suggests. Each thought you think, each observation you make, each memory you access might contribute to the ongoing construction of a reality that includes its own past as a dynamic variable rather than a fixed foundation. The temporal paradoxes persist in this quantum framework, but they transform from sharp logical contradictions into dynamic processes of possibility collapse. Grandfather paradoxes become superpositions of contradictory timelines that resolve through measurement. Bootstrap paradoxes become information existing in quantum suspension until observation forces them into definite causal loops. Predestination paradoxes become self-fulfilling patterns that operate through quantum correlation rather than classical mechanical necessity. The universe reveals itself as a place where logic and physics interweave through consciousness in ways that challenge the fundamental categories through which we organize experience. Time becomes not a simple dimension through which events unfold, but a complex quantum field where past, present, and future exist in superposition until the ongoing process of observation and measurement collapses them into the coherent narrative we call reality. Perhaps what makes these quantum temporal paradoxes most unsettling is how they blur the boundary between subjective experience and objective reality. If consciousness plays a fundamental role in collapsing quantum superpositions across time, then the distinction between what happens in your mind and what happens in the world becomes less sharply defined than everyday experience suggests. Your memories might not be recordings of fixed events, but active participants in the ongoing construction of history. Your thoughts might not be private internal experiences, but quantum measurements that shape the interpretive development of the ideas they contemplate. Your dreams might not be mere neural activity, but explorations of quantum superpositions that help determine which possibilities become real in your waking timeline. The feeling of being a continuous self moving through time might mask a more complex reality where identity itself exists in quantum superposition across multiple potential histories. The person you were yesterday and the person you are today might be connected not by simple temporal continuity, but by quantum correlations that span the gap between past and present through measurement processes you're not consciously aware of. This quantum view of personal identity suggests that the self is not a thing that persists through time, but a pattern of quantum measurements that continuously constructs its own history. You don't simply remember your past. You participate in stabilizing what past there is to remember through the ongoing process of consciousness and observation. The choices you make take on new significance in this framework. Each decision might represent a quantum measurement that collapses superpositions, not just of future possibilities, but of past events that led to the moment of choice. Free will becomes not the ability to determine future outcomes, but participation in the quantum process that constructs coherent timelines where choices and their consequences form self-consistent narratives. The experience of regret and satisfaction with past decisions transforms when viewed through this quantum lens. You might not be evaluating fixed events that can't be changed, but participating in the ongoing process that determines how those events are contextually understood. The past becomes not a burden of unchangeable mistakes, but a quantum field of possibilities that consciousness helps collapse into definite form. As you sit in the quiet darkness, perhaps aware of the subtle processes of memory and thought that connect this moment to your personal history, you might sense the quantum measurements occurring beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. Each breath you take, each heartbeat you feel, each photon that strikes your retina might contribute to the vast network of quantum observations that maintain the coherent timeline you experience as your life. The room around you exists not as a collection of fixed objects with definite properties, but as a quantum superposition of all possible arrangements that collapses into specific form through your ongoing observation. The chair you're sitting in, the walls that surround you, the air you're breathing, all of these might exist in quantum potentiality until the process of perception forces them into the definite states you experience. The boundary between your consciousness and the physical world becomes less sharp when viewed through the lens of quantum measurement. Your awareness doesn't simply receive information about external reality. It participates in the process that determines how external reality is experienced. Mind and worlds interweave through quantum correlation in ways that make both more mysterious and more intimately connected than classical physics suggests. This quantum entanglement of consciousness and reality extends beyond individual perception to the shared world that multiple observers inhabit together. The consensus reality that emerges when different people observe the same events might result from quantum correlations between their measurement processes rather than simple agreement about independently existing facts. The conversation you had with a friend yesterday exists not as a fixed sequence of words that were spoken, but as a quantum correlation between your memory and theirs that maintains consistency across both of your personal timelines. The shared meaning that emerges from communication might operate through quantum processes that entangle the consciousness of speaker and listener in ways that transcend classical information transfer. Language itself becomes a quantum phenomenon where words exist in superposition across multiple meanings until the process of understanding collapses them into specific interpretations. The sentence you're reading right now might mean something slightly different than it meant when you started reading it, its significance determined by the quantum measurements of comprehension that occur as your consciousness processes each word. The temporal paradoxes we've explored throughout this journey reveal themselves as windows into this deeper quantum reality where consciousness, measurement, and the structure of space-time interweave in patterns that challenge every assumption about the nature of existence. They show us a universe that operates according to principles that transcend logical categorization while somehow maintaining enough coherence to support the logical beings who contemplate them. You continue forward through this quantum temporal landscape, your consciousness both observing and participating in shaping the reality it inhabits. Each moment contains infinite possibilities for paradox and contradiction, yet somehow the ongoing process of quantum measurement resolves these contradictions into the coherent flow of experience you call your life. The mathematics of quantum mechanics and general relativity continue to evolve, revealing new aspects of the relationship between time, consciousness, and reality. But the fundamental mystery deepens rather than resolves with increased understanding. Each advance in theoretical physics opens new questions about the nature of observation, measurement, and the role of consciousness in determining the structure of space-time. Future experiments in quantum gravity and consciousness research might reveal whether the relationship between mind and time is as intimate as these paradoxes suggest. Technologies that can create controlled, closed timelike curves or maintain quantum coherence across extended periods might allow carefully constrained testing of whether consciousness plays a fundamental role in resolving temporal contradictions. But regardless of what future discoveries reveal, the temporal paradoxes persist as profound challenges to our understanding of existence itself. They reveal time not as a simple backdrop against which events unfolds, but as a complex quantum field where past, present, and future exist in dynamic relationship through processes that include consciousness as an active component rather than a passive observer. The 7 paradoxes we've journeyed through represent just the beginning of this mystery. Each one opens onto deeper questions about the nature of causation, identity, and meaning that extend far beyond the boundaries of physics into the fundamental structure of experience itself. They suggest that reality is stranger, not just than we suppose, but stranger than we can suppose, while remaining the kinds of beings capable of supposing anything at all. In the quiet spaces between thoughts, when the familiar rhythms of sequential experience momentarily pause, you might sense this deeper strangeness operating beneath the surface of ordinary time. The paradoxes continue their silent work in the quantum foam that underlies all macroscopic phenomena, creating brief instabilities in the causal structure of reality that somehow resolve themselves before they can destabilize the coherent flow of conscious experience. Time flows around these quantum contradictions, like consciousness flows around the paradoxes of self-reference and infinite regress that emerge whenever awareness turns back upon itself. The mystery remains not because it lacks resolution, but because its resolution operates at levels of reality that transcend the categories through which conscious beings organize their understanding. You exist within this mystery as both observer and participant, consciousness and quantum measurement, temporal paradox, and its own resolution. The flow of time that carries you from moment to moment operates through mechanisms that include your awareness as an integral element rather than an accidental byproduct. Each breath you take participates in the vast quantum collaboration that maintains the coherent timeline where breathing remains possible. The universe continues its patient unfolding through processes that permit conceptual inconsistency while maintaining enough stability to support beings capable of contemplating inconsistency itself. Time becomes not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be inhabited. A temporal landscape where consciousness and cosmos interweave in patterns that challenge understanding while somehow enabling the understanding that challenges them. In this quantum temporal landscape, where every moment contains hidden infinities of paradox and possibility, you continue forward through a reality that might be more strange and more intimate than the smooth progression of experience suggests, carried by the gentle current of time toward whatever impossible possibilities await in the mysterious depths of existence itself. Perhaps the most profound challenge to our understanding emerges from the very nature of observation itself. The act of measuring quantum systems doesn't simply reveal their properties, it fundamentally influences them. And when this measurement process interacts with the possibility of temporal loops, reality becomes something far more participatory than we typically imagine. Consider what happens when quantum information becomes entangled across time. A measurement performed today can influence the described state of a particle that existed yesterday. The particle doesn't simply have properties that we discover through measurement. The measurement participates in establishing the properties it appears to detect, extending backward through time to determine what becomes historically consistent. This quantum measurement paradox transforms time from a passive stage where events unfold into an active participant in the construction of reality itself. Past and future become entangled through measurement processes that operate according to principles our everyday experience cannot accommodate. The universe reveals itself as a place where consciousness and physics collaborate in ways that make the boundary between observer and observed feel less absolute. Notice how this challenges your sense of memory and personal history. The events you remember from your past might not be fixed recordings of what happened. They might be active participants in an ongoing process where the present continuously organizes its own history through the subtle quantum measurements that occur whenever consciousness accesses memory. The coffee cup that shattered yesterday, the conversation you had last week, the decision you made last month, all of these might exist in quantum superposition until the moment of remembering forces them into definite form. Memory becomes not retrieval of stored information, but participation in the quantum process that determines how events are stabilized. This doesn't mean your memories are false or that the past didn't happen. Rather, it suggests that the past might be more fluid than we assume, continuously crystallizing through the ongoing dance between consciousness and quantum measurement. Each moment of awareness contributes to the retroactive construction of a coherent timeline where cause and effect maintain their apparent sequence despite operating through mechanisms that transcend simple temporal ordering. The implications ripple outward from individual consciousness to the nature of shared reality itself. When multiple observers witness the same events, their collective measurements might create quantum correlations that maintain consistency across different personal timelines. The world we inhabit together becomes not a collection of independently existing facts, but a collaborative construction maintained through the subtle entanglement of conscious observation. Language takes on new significance in this framework. The words you're processing right now exist in quantum superposition across multiple meanings until the act of understanding collapses them into specific interpretations. Communication becomes a quantum phenomenon where meaning emerges through the entanglement of consciousness rather than simple transfer of information from one mind to another. The process of learning itself transforms from accumulation of knowledge over time into a complex quantum interaction where understanding in the present retroactively determines what educational experiences contributed to current knowledge. The books that shaped your thinking, the teachers who influenced your development, the conversations that sparked insight. All of these might exist in superposition until moments of comprehension force them into coherent narratives of intellectual growth. As you sit in the quiet darkness, perhaps aware of the subtle processes of thought and memory that connect this moment to your personal history, you might sense the quantum measurements occurring beneath conscious awareness. Each breath, each heartbeat, each photon entering your eyes contributes to the vast network of observations that maintain the timeline you experience as your life. The room around you doesn't simply exist with definite properties waiting to be discovered. It exists in quantum superposition until your ongoing perception forces it into the specific arrangement you experience. The chair supporting you, the air you're breathing, the sounds you're hearing. All of these emerge from quantum possibility through the mysterious intersection of consciousness and measurement. But perhaps most unsettling is what this suggests about the nature of choice and free will. If consciousness participates in the quantum construction of reality, then your decisions might operate through mechanisms more complex than simple determination of future outcomes. Each choice might represent a quantum measurement that organizes the history leading to the moment of decision. Free will becomes not the ability to determine what happens next, but participation in the ongoing process that constructs coherent timelines where choices and consequences form self-consistent narratives. The weight of decision transforms from anxiety about uncertain futures into participation in the quantum collaboration that maintains the structural coherence of existence itself. The experience of regret and satisfaction with past decisions takes on new depth when viewed through this quantum lens. You might not be evaluating fixed events that are permanently settled, but participating in the process that determines what events there are to evaluate. The past becomes not a burden of unchangeable mistakes, but a quantum field of possibilities that consciousness helps collapse into definite form. This quantum view of temporal paradoxes suggests that consciousness plays a role in maintaining the universe's logical consistency, not through mystical intervention or supernatural influence, but through the precise physical processes of quantum measurement that operate whenever awareness encounters reality. Every conscious observation contributes to the ongoing resolution of potential contradictions through mechanisms that operate at scales of time and space too small for direct experience. The grandfather paradox resolves not through cosmic conspiracy or timeline protection, but through quantum superposition, where contradictory histories coexist until measurement forces collapse into consistency. The bootstrap paradox dissolves into information existing in quantum indeterminacy until observation crystallizes it into definite causal loops. Predestination paradoxes become self-fulfilling patterns that operate through quantum correlation rather than mechanical necessity. But this quantum resolution of temporal paradoxes comes with its own profound mysteries. If consciousness participates in maintaining logical consistency through quantum measurement, then the emergence of aware beings in the universe becomes not an accidental byproduct of complex chemistry, but a deeply consequential feature of reality's self-maintenance. The anthropic principle takes on new meaning in this context. We don't simply observe a universe that happens to be compatible with consciousness. We inhabit a universe that may depend on consciousness to maintain its own logical coherence. The rare conditions that permit the emergence of aware beings become not merely necessary for observation, but necessary for the stability of existence itself. Life and consciousness transform from optional additions to an otherwise complete physical reality into essential components of a cosmos that cannot exist in stable form without them. The universe reveals itself as fundamentally participatory, requiring the collaboration of conscious observers to resolve the quantum paradoxes that emerge from its own mathematical structure. You exist within this vast collaboration, your awareness entangled with measurement processes that extend across space and time in ways that make individual identity feel both more significant and more mysterious than everyday experience suggests. Each thought you think, each memory you access, each moment of conscious observation might contribute to the ongoing construction of reality that includes its own past as a dynamic variable rather than a fixed foundation. The temporal paradoxes persist in this quantum framework, but they transform from sharp logical contradictions into dynamic processes of possibility collapse. They operate in the quantum foam underlying all macroscopic phenomena, creating brief instabilities in the causal structure of space-time that resolve through measurement before they can propagate into the classical world of everyday experience. Time flows around these quantum contradictions like a river flows around submerged stones, maintaining its overall direction while accommodating local turbulence that challenges simple notions of linear progression. The smooth flow of conscious experience masks underlying complexity where past, present, and future exist in quantum relationship through processes that transcend classical temporal ordering. As you continue through this moment, carried by the gentle current of time toward whatever unexpected possibilities await in the mysterious depths of existence, You participate in whatever quantum processes maintain the coherent flow from past to future. Your consciousness becomes both observer and participant in the ongoing construction of reality, awareness, and measurement, temporal paradox, and its own resolution. The mathematics continue to evolve, revealing new aspects of the relationship between time, consciousness, and quantum mechanics. But the fundamental mystery deepens rather than resolves with increased understanding. Each advance in theoretical physics opens new questions about the nature of observation and the role of awareness in determining the structure of space-time itself. The universe continues its patient unfolding through mechanisms that permit conceptual inconsistency while maintaining enough stability to support beings capable of contemplating inconsistency. Time becomes not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be inhabited, a quantum landscape where consciousness and cosmos interweave in patterns that challenge understanding, while somehow enabling the understanding that challenges them. In the quiet spaces between thoughts, when the familiar rhythms of sequential experience momentarily pause, you might sense this deeper strangeness operating beneath the surface of ordinary time. The paradoxes continue their silent work in dimensions too small for direct perception, creating and resolving contradictions through processes that include your awareness as an integral element rather than an accidental observer. The 7 paradoxes we've explored reveal themselves as windows into a reality where physics and consciousness collaborate through quantum mechanics in ways that make both more mysterious and more intimately connected than classical science suggests. They show us a universe that operates according to principles that transcend logical categorization while somehow maintaining enough coherence to support the logical beings who contemplate them. Perhaps what makes these temporal paradoxes most profound is not their complexity, but their simplicity. They emerge naturally from the mathematical foundations of our most successful theories about space, time, and matter. They require no exotic technologies or speculative physics. They arise directly from taking quantum mechanics and general relativity seriously and following their implications to logical conclusions. The universe reveals itself as a place where time can loop back on itself, where information can exist without origin, where the future can influence interpretations of the past, and where consciousness might participate in maintaining logical consistency through quantum processes operating at scales too small for direct observation. Reality becomes stranger not just than we suppose, but stranger than we can suppose, while remaining the kinds of beings capable of supposing anything at all. In this quantum temporal landscape, where every moment contains hidden infinities of paradox and possibility, you continue forward through a reality that might be more strange and more intimate than the smooth progression of experience suggests, your consciousness both creating and discovering the timeline it inhabits, time itself flowing around contradictions, too deep for resolution, but somehow gentle enough to carry the awareness that contemplates them toward whatever unknown destinations await in the endless mystery of existence. The 7 paradoxes emerge from the mathematical heart of our most successful theories, not as failures of physics, but as glimpses into a reality that operates according to principles our minds weren't shaped to grasp. They reveal time not as the simple progression we experience, but as something far more complex, where causation can flow in circles, where information can exist without origin, where the future might contribute to shaping its own past. Current models suggest that quantum decoherence and thermal noise might resolve these paradoxes before they can destabilize reality, turning sharp logical contradictions into brief quantum fluctuations that dissolve before reaching macroscopic scales. The universe appears to have mechanisms that prevent paradoxes from propagating into the classical world we inhabit, maintaining just enough stability to support the complex structures that give rise to consciousness and observation. Yet the deeper mystery persists. Whether these paradoxes represent genuine features of reality or limitations in our current understanding remains an open question. Physics does not yet have complete answers about the relationship between time, consciousness, and the fundamental structure of space-time. Each potential resolution creates new questions that might be stranger than the original paradoxes. As you sit in the quiet darkness, perhaps aware of the thermal radiation from your own body mixing with ancient photons from across the cosmos, you participate in the same processes that might maintain the stability of time itself. Your existence unfolds within a universe where logic and physics interweave through mechanisms that challenge the basic categories of thought, while somehow maintaining enough coherence to support the thinking that challenges them. The paradoxes continue their silent work in the quantum foam that underlies all macroscopic phenomena, creating brief instabilities in the causal structure of reality that resolve themselves before they can disturb the smooth flow of conscious experience. Time flows around these quantum contradictions, like water around stones, maintaining its overall direction while accommodating local turbulence that makes the very notion of linear progression feel like a useful approximation rather than a fundamental truth. You continue forward through this temporal landscape, where every moment might contain hidden infinities of possibility and paradox, carried by processes that permit conceptual inconsistency while maintaining enough stability to support the awareness that contemplates inconsistency itself. The universe reveals itself as stranger than we can suppose, while remaining gentle enough to cradle the supposing. In the spaces between heartbeats, time itself might be stranger than the smooth sequence of moments suggests.